if it isn't obvious by my current getup and my surroundings, I really love dragons. And my favorite dragon, if you can't tell, is Spyro. I even have a tattoo of him on my thigh. This little guy was absolutely my introduction into dragons. Spyro was my first video game at age 6. This skateboarding, low poly little sunglass wearing purple dude was my gateway into fantasy stuff. I devoured any content I could after that of dragons, whether that meant Aragon, Dragonology books, Dragon Tales on PBS when I was little. I even walked down the aisle for my wedding to Romantic Flight from How to Train Your Dragon, and my first dance was for the Dancing and the Dreaming, the song that Stoic and Valka danced to in the second film. All that to say, I feel like I'm pretty qualified to talk about dragons. So when I heard that Pointy Hat and Ginny D were putting on Monster Week and the theme was dragons this year, you know I had to participate. So grab your coffee, get comfy, get cozy, join me, and let's talk about making D&D dragons a little more exciting. Because compared to a lot of dragons, they don't have much going on. As written, D&D dragons are pretty black and white. Don't get me wrong, there's also red, blue, green, etc. But it's a red dragon is evil and has fire breath. A white dragon is evil and has ice breath. A silver dragon is good and has ice breath. I think you're seeing the point here. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but all of my favorite dragons usually have a little more aspects to them than just good or bad based on color. And after you've played for a while and you've run into a couple of dragons, you kind of start to know what to expect. But I think that there's a pretty easy solution for mixing it up and at least surprising even the most veteran of players. I'm unfortunately not going to be referencing Spyro a ton because despite him being the best boy, I don't know that dragons on skateboards work for a lot of campaigns. But hey, if you have one where that fits, please take that and run with it, and please let me know because that sounds phenomenal. I would like to play in that. However, I think How to Train Your Dragon is one of the best case studies in dragon creation. There's a pretty natural mental connection between the color of a dragon and the powers that it has. Red breathes fire, white has ice powers, snow powers. Makes sense. It also may help players to clock that something might be different and maybe they need to swap out their gear or what sort of spells they have prepped to find white scales versus red scales, especially if you've got a game that has multiple dragons. I think that that's a great puzzle piece or foreshadowing to let them know what to expect so that they can actually be prepared for the fight. But there are other ways that you can make dragons more exciting even while keeping the red dragons breathe fire trope. Dragon Age, for example, has something that I really love. The dragons in Dragon Age actually have different shapes depending on what sort of powers they have. So, for example, a ice dragon in Dragon Age, aside from being white usually, at least as a main color, they're also very colorful dragons usually, but it has a shorter, stumpier snout, while the fire dragons have a longer, pointier nose in comparison. I love the implication that for whatever reason, this means that the ice dragon needed a larger sinus cavity to deal with the cold effects of what they're doing. And I think that sort of evolutionary or habitat-based tactic is a fun place to go to add flavor to your dragons without having to completely make a homebrew stat block. And I think that's the goal of this video, is to give options to add to a stat block versus creating a whole new one. Because it's a lot easier for newbies to add to a stat block. It's a lot easier for new DMs to tweak and change a couple of things on a stat block than trying to figure out how to balance their brand new own stat blocks. And these are going to be some ideas for that. When I say I like evolutionary or habitat tactics, How to Train Your Dragon is basically a masterclass on this. In How to Train Your Dragon, the dragons are all created to make sense of their environment. And aside from that, they also have different flavors the way that cats and dogs do. A dragon of the same breed might come in a few different colors, but they also have a variety of different habitat-based abilities. Some examples that you see in How to Train Your Dragon, and especially in the series shows that came out, is, for example, the Timberjack. The Timberjack doesn't have front legs because it needs to be able to maneuver around dense forests and woods and uses its giant wings to instead slice its way through obstacles instead of using four legs to pad around on the ground. The Thunderdrum lives in deep, dark oceans and has a giant mouth to create these sonic blasts. But because it lives in an ocean, it doesn't make sense for it to really use fire attacks, so it uses those sonic blasts that can impact the water around it as well. Adding a habitat shift and the consequences of those shifts and effects to a dragon's repertoire could make the dragon not only a more powerful beast for your party to fight if you're at the point of needing to throw the entire monster manual at them, but it can mix it up enough to make it feel like a whole new encounter and make combat more exciting instead of people just standing around taking turns bashing the dragon. So, let's give an example. Let's take our red dragon who breathes fire, and let's say that it's been terrorizing a local area. Let's set the scene. The party had a simple task: go to the neighboring village, deliver some supplies. But as they approached the mark on the map, what should be a bustling town is just charred remains. Ash everywhere, the smell of charred flesh, and the lack of noise was violently loud. There's supposed to be life here, and all around them was nothing but death. Walking through the village, the party sees glass melted on windows, and it doesn't take long for everyone to realize they're dealing with a dragon, because nothing else can cause this level of destruction. So, at the request of the neighboring village, the players go out to hunt this dragon. They want to keep the destruction from occurring again. Makes sense. The reason the dragon destroyed the town? Dealer's choice in this instance. Maybe it's just an evil dragon. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Maybe it's mad because something stole its eggs. Maybe the town stopped paying their annual subscription service to not getting hit by fire breath. That part, dealer's choice, whatever you'd like it to be. But the part that we're going to focus on is what changes we want to make to this red dragon before and when the players get to it. Let's say this dragon doesn't live too far from the village it's destroyed. It's a wooded area with a lot of thick trees, and the canopy of those trees is super thick. Sunlight speckles through sometimes, but it's dense. The dragon still needs to hunt, and it's not exactly going to be destroying villages every single day. Doesn't really work great for the food to regenerate that way. But with the forest so dense and so hard to see through from up top because that canopy is so thick, it needs to pivot how it's hunting. So it hunts from the ground. From the ground, there's plenty of room between tree trunks for a dragon to stalk through, but a giant red dragon on the ground is not exactly subtle. So, to give the dragon an edge in hunting as well as in potential upcoming fights with adventurers that may or may not be hunting it, it needs some different tactics. One option that we would have is to give it a chameleon effect ability. Something to where it can move its scales on its body so that those scales reflect light in different positions, and that makes it harder to see, and it would cause the players to have to roll higher perception checks to even clock that the dragon is there before it clocks them. It's not fully invisible, but it's enough to give it a leg up, and it's enough to make it to where that dragon can successfully hunt and live in this area. Because if it was going to live in a densely packed forest and it doesn't have a way to hunt from the ground, it wouldn't be a forest anymore, it would just be a charred wasteland. As far as mechanics go, this could operate a lot like the blur spell. Or if you are a little concerned that disadvantage might be a little too harsh, depending on what player level your players are at, uh, maybe it's just a +2 to its AC until they get that first hit in and some of those scales stop being able to shift around to refract that light. Or let's go the Timberjack route. Its habitat action could be that when it moves and when it decides to take flight, it can cut through those thick trees and cause obstacles to come crashing down on the players. Large logs get tossed across the battlefield, and the players have to make a dexterity saving throw in order to not get squashed like a pancake. Now that the dragon is in the air and there's that open hole where the trees used to be, there's also now more cover from the trees that have tumbled out. There is potential to get on higher ground to reach the dragon because of the way the trees have bent and been sliced. And since it's doing it as just a side effect of its movement, the fight now becomes a puzzle on how to get it to either stop moving or how to reach it now that it has moved. Again, I'm not changing the entire stat block here. I think that just adding to it and tweaking it can make enough of a difference to where people aren't going to groan like, oh no, another dragon. Oh, this one's an ice dragon. I know how to deal with it. But if you don't have a ton of minions breaking up the action economy, this can be a great way to sort of give the dragon a leg up and not just get absolutely pummeled. This gives the dragon the opportunity to do really cool dragon stuff and look really cool, while still also being recognized as a red dragon at its core. It also makes the boss fight a lot less stagnant with people just standing in a row and bonking the big bad and waiting for the next round, because that's how a lot of fights end up going. But it is adding more options to the dragon to do these things as free turns to help keep the tides in its favor and to make the fight feel more dynamic and more life-threatening, the way that an adult dragon should make players feel. You absolutely can just completely redo an entire stat block or make your own custom stat block for the Timberjack or the Monstrous Nightmare in How to Train Your Dragon. But for the sake of this being more beginner friendly, because this channel is geared more towards beginners, the optional just free actions to add on can really spice things up. And in honor of this being Dragon Week, as put on by Jenny D and Pointy Hat, I've taken on the Pointy Hat way, and I have put a document of suggested habitat lair actions, working title, in the description below. These can work for a bunch of different dragons, and I've broken it up by habitat. Obviously, these will make the dragons more challenging, so keep that in mind when deciding how many of these actions to give to your dragons. Some are just free actions when a dragon moves, and some are just free actions for when a dragon moves, it just does this too. Or some of them are an extra attack that you could either add as an extra attack or replace maybe the claw version with a wing swipe. But right now, environmentally based lair action is the best descriptor I have for these. If someone has a better title for these in the comments, let me know. I would love to hear it. And also, let me know in the comments what your favorite pop culture dragon is. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hi, baby. You gonna help Mama? You gonna help Mama make a Dragon Week video? Hi. Can you say hi? Can you say hi?